Few things are for sure in this life, but this is. If we live for any substantial amount of time, we will encounter grief due to the loss of a loved one. Not something any of us ever want, and we all handle it differently. This podcast is to feature those who have done purposeful and meaningful things through their grief. These people featured on here are normal folks, just like you and me, who were thrust into a place they never wanted to be in their lives. A painful place. As they move through their pain, they realize that something worthwhile, something for the greater good could come out of the unthinkable. I'm sure that none of them would ever consider themselves to be a hero, but when I searched the definition of the word hero, I found this: a person who is admired or idolized for courage, outstanding achievements, or noble qualities. And that fit. And so it's my privilege to bring you the remarkable stories of these heroes in grief. Hi, everyone. This is Tom, your host for the Heroes in Grief podcast, and the response has been incredible so far, and I want to thank you for that. It's getting out to people, and they're letting us know that it's helping them, and that is what it's all about. I want to make you aware of a way that you can support this podcast without having to spend 1 cent, and that is through affiliate marketing. I've set up affiliate marketing for online shopping. If you do online shopping, then I have links to all the major retailers, most of them anyways, and I can provide them for you so that when you buy online through those links, you'll help support the podcast through the percentages that we get. It doesn't cost you anything more. You just shop like you regularly would on the sites that you love. It's very easy. All you have to do is shop. And that's it. Just let me know the links to the places that you want to shop at, and I will provide the affiliate links so that you can do it. If you want more information on this, you can go to heroesingrief.com. It takes you to the Linktree page where a video explains it in a little more detail. But you can always email me at tom@heroesingrief.com, and I can answer questions for you. But you can support the podcast that way, and it's very easy, very simple, and it doesn't cost you a cent. Isn't that great? Thank you. Now here's today's episode. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Heroes in Grief today. And I've got Sundari Malcolm with me today. And I am excited to have her because I love the aspect of this podcast that it's covering so many different aspects of help with grief and help with many other things too, that I like to cover things for everybody and get things out there. I firmly believe that there's something out there for everybody. So Sundari is going to give us some great information here because she has a vast background and something that's different than most that you hear out there, which is great. So that covers an aspect for her because of her spiritual upbringing and everything. And she traversed she has traversed cancer in her parents' lives and lost both of them within a span of 4 years. So that changed her trajectory in life, and now she's doing helpful things for people. And I'm not going to get into all that because we're going to let her tell you all about it. Sundari, thank you for being on Heroes in Grief, and welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Tom. Hello to your community. Hello to the listeners. Happy to be here.
Thank you. I want you to tell your story, of course, but I certainly would love to cover those aspects that I talked about because I love the diversity that we can get out there for people so that they can connect with something that means something to them. So if you wouldn't mind sharing your story in the way that you would like.
Oh, certainly. I too agree that I'm always hopeful that somebody sees something in my story or hears something that validates an experience or an emotion for them. Um, I am 44 now, and my grief journey started when I was in my early 20s. So I was a student at the University of Delaware. I was in my final year when my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer for the second time. And so it became clear that I needed to come home and I needed to be in the house with her. And at that point, we weren't exactly sure in which direction we were heading. I, at that point, was working in public relations. I'm originally from New York. Let's start with that. I'm originally from New York, from Manhattan. And I split my time being raised between New York and a spiritual ashram, which is a spiritual community named Yogaville in Virginia. And so raised with spiritual teachings, and that will weave back in later. But at this point, I'm working in public relations and I'm a caregiver for my mother. And I was estranged from my father at the time and I had no siblings. And so I became her primary caregiver. I was lucky that she had wonderful friends. She was a school teacher in Chappaqua, New York, which is in Westchester, New York, and surrounded by phenomenal colleagues who were able to step in when they were able to. Um, However, the majority was on me, and I was in my early 20s. And for those who are listening who have ever been caregivers, it is intense. There is
Hmm.
no training for that. All of a sudden, you need to be well versed in medical jargon and insurance forms, in caring for a physical body and emotional body, and all of the shifts that come with the relationship that you have with this person.
Yeah.
And at some point, it became clear that I needed to leave my job and that this was going to be my full time job. And she passed when I was 27 in 2007.
Very sorry.
Thank you. And after that time, those who know grief know that there is like a real period of grief fog. I did not do a whole lot. I did a lot of, if you've read my book, Grief Gems, I speak to that year where I laid on my couch watching the Food Network and drinking wine and not really moving much. Um, and I was just kind of stuck. At this point, I had lost what was I considered to be my main tether, right, to my reality here and to who I was as a person. I had left a job. And when you're in your 20s, you're also, that's that transitional stage where your friends are getting married, right? And your friends are starting to have children and branch off into their careers. And I was like, what the hell just happened to my life?
Right.
And I went on, I knew that I needed to have a shift. And because I had been raised with spiritual teachings, my first thing was I need to get out of New York City, which is where I was living. And I need to travel, but I don't have the wherewithal to put anything together myself or figure this out. So I went on a yoga retreat and I went with Integral Yoga, who was connected through the spiritual community that I'd been raised with. And I went to Guatemala and it changed my life. Um, it changed my life in the awareness that I was at this threshold, right, of really being able to decide what I wanted life to look like right now, to figure out who I was going to be in this moment without my mother, who had been such a strong force in my life. Um, I also realized at that time that the tools that I was pulling on, which were yoga and meditation and breath work, were also things that I realized other people needed to realize that they could apply to their own loss. That if it was helping me, that this is what was going to help other people. And so it's when I started to look at this as like, okay, I want to weave this all together. And I started to take yoga teacher trainings, and that led into grief and doula work. And at 31, my father is diagnosed with brain cancer. And this was a
Oof.
completely different relationship. I had been raised with him, but we had been estranged since I was in junior high school around, um, and had not talked much since my mother had passed. There was a lot of tension there. And so there was a different feeling of being the caregiver for my mother and being asked to step in for my father. He luckily was living with someone, his domestic partner. And so I did not have to step in as a full-time caregiver, but still needed to be a part of this and to help make decisions and to watch my father die. And within a year, he had passed.
Mm.
Um,
Was he receptive to that when to you coming in like that?
so he was receptive. I've spoken about this on other podcasts that I think I thought at the time, like, oh, this is going to be that Hallmark moment they show you when, like,
Hmm.
we're going to have that conversation, right? And like, and there's going to be I'm sorry's and forgiveness. And I mean, that never happened. And that's had to be part of my grief since then, right? Of I never got those conversations I expected would come from a parent, because that's what movies had shown me parents did at the end of their lives.
Hmm.
Um, and he was certainly receptive to me being there. I think a lot of our tension came from my side as the child and not so much from his side. there was no anger. It was just a void. Well, there was anger on my side. There was a void on his. And
Yeah, but he was appreciative to you being
yeah,
there.
but he was
So,
appreciative
yeah.
to me being there. It was just, we played crossword puzzles and I helped him as his body deteriorated, and the conversations didn't happen, but I was able to be there. The grief, I speak to that grief because I like to bring that relationship up for people. So much of what mainstream grief tells us, or the conversation around it when we talk about those who have died, is we say things like loved ones. And
Yeah.
that immediately puts people in a box and cuts people out of a conversation, right? Just, you don't have to have deeply loved somebody to grieve them. You can have a truly complicated relationship with somebody and still deeply grieve what either couldn't happen or won't happen or what did happen. And so I speak to that relationship because it was certainly a difference. However, in losing my parents, you feel completely untethered at that point, right? You're 31, but you're an orphan. Um, and that was terrifying. What I think it also did for me, when in hindsight particularly, was it gave me a sort of freedom. Um, I think that so many of us spend our lives mitigating the opinions of others, right?
Mhm.
Specifically our immediate families. And it doesn't matter the age. We choose partners, jobs, towns, homes, a lot of things dependent on how this will look within our family unit and how this will fit into how we've been raised, and what we look to carry on. And when you're cut off from that, it's like, well, it's like I can really do just about anything now.
Yeah, welcome to
Um,
the show, right? It's almost like a job situation, right? Where you've been under management or something and you're always like, "Oh, I would do it this way, I would do it that way." And all of a sudden you're vaulted into that. And so you have
yes,
the opportunity, okay, time to put your practice into work. Let's see what you got, right?
absolutely. And and that's not to invalidate like how sad it was, how scary it was, how much work I
Sure.
have done to arrive at the place where I can giggle as I say so. However, I do look back at that and it's like that is really what pushed me into doing as much travel as I wound up doing, and making braver choices and deciding to really live in this grief and death work, and to spend what has now been 17 years, right, helping people transition, either through grief or through death. I've been a birth doula as well since 2008. Um, and what a beautiful path this has turned into. Um, and I cannot imagine it any other way, to be honest. So,
Yeah, not any route that you expected to take in your life, right?
no,
Yeah.
no.
So I want to touch on something you brought up, and I think the complexities of caring for somebody
Mm-hmm,
when you're doing that. We did for my mom too for about 10 months before she passed,
mm-hmm,
and so there's so many things that enter into that that are unexpected that you're not ready for a lot of times,
mm-hmm.
and the processing of all of it as you go through it. The change in your person, all of those things that you have to deal with as you're taking on all these things that you talked about, the
Mm-hmm.
practical things.
Mm-hmm.
But you also are going through a lot of mental things during
Mm-hmm.
that you need to really have some assistance with. That's where I
Mm-hmm.
hear, I worked for hospice for a while. I know that the
Mm-hmm.
support systems of organizations like that can really help you during those
Mm-hmm.
times. And so, not hospice only, but other people
Mm-hmm.
like yourself, I'm sure,
Mm-hmm.
being a death doula. And
Mm-hmm.
these are new things that are out there available for people that are very welcome and needed
Yeah.
because of all the dynamics that you face that you have no idea that you're going to face when you get into that sometimes. Right.
It's interesting because
Hello, friends. I just wanted to take a brief break here in the podcast to make you aware of a very exciting partnership that Heroes in Grief has just formed, and that is with Get Griefy Magazine. I'm going to let their founder and editor-in-chief, Kara Sanchez, tell you all about it.
Hey, Heroes in Grief listeners! Life after loss isn't easy, but it can be colorful and full of possibilities. Meet Get Griefy Magazine, a vibrant resource filled with inspiring stories of life after loss, expert advice, and voices from everyday grievers and thought leaders. Together, they're here to help guide you toward the side of life that's left to be lived fully and authentically. Dive into Get Griefy for free on issue or snag a print copy on Amazon. Connect with us on Instagram at Get Griefy Magazine or visit getgriefymagazine.com to explore, join our thriving small business collective, or discover advertising opportunities. Let's embrace life after loss, boldly and together.
And now back to our episode.
You know, I bring up the mainstream conversation or movies surrounding things in my conversation a lot because it's a reminding us as those who are walking through this path how much we are often programmed without realizing it, right? And how much we are programmed to believe that grief is something that you get over and that you get over it quickly and that you get over it individually, most importantly. That death is just something that, like, oh, it happens to everyone and it will be sad, but we don't really need to pay much attention to any of this. What's interesting about grief doula and death doula work is that people often think it's new, but it's like the job title might be perhaps on the main stage conversation. But this is a role that has been played within villages and towns and family lineages since the beginning of time, right? Because it is within ancient times that they understood that grief and death were to be cared for in ceremony and in community. And they were to be done so with care and with ritual and with intent. And it is only within Western modern society that we have made this a siloed individual experience that you must traverse by yourself and alone and quickly. You know, and it's for those who choose to do this work. I think it's those of us who understand, like, people need support and help, that we have to deprogram ourselves from thinking that you're supposed to do this alone, or that it was supposed to be easy or quick, or that you didn't need tools that came from lots of different places. And when it came to, it's what started my work, is having been a caregiver, realizing how little support there were for the people who were sitting in the room, right? For the people who had to answer that phone call from the doctor, for the people who had to read through that paperwork, who had to set up hospice, who had to, so, you know, I to this day, I always mention, like, I haven't turned my phone on, my ringer on, since 2007 when my mother died. It's always been kept off because 7 years of a caregiver, of having to sit by your phone waiting for it to ring to give you some terrible news, right? As healed as I am, that is still a piece of trauma that I walk with, right? And these are the little things that, like, caregivers are just kind of out there flailing. And aside from just that, it's like no one tells you that you might be really angry and that you're going to have a lot of frustration about the role that you have been assigned, whether you would do it or not. You know, there's so many things wrapped up into that experience. And it's certainly what prompted me to begin my work of, like, oh, there have to be people that are helping these people process what they're helping other people go through, you know.
Right, because like you said, society, friend of mine and guest, Sandra Champlain, she brought up that, you know, in the 1800s still, people died all the time around you because of the circumstances. And it was just part of their life more. And they held funerals right in the home, or wakes right in the home and everything. And that's where the term parlor came from, funeral parlor and everything. So, you know, it was more, I guess, normalized in their society. And we have lost that completely, supposedly because of this protection of self or something, which I think is having the opposite effect.
Absolutely.
That we should be more proactive in this conversation and get it out there to people way ahead of time so that they're better equipped when that time comes.
Absolutely. It's like, you know, this does not miss any of us. And so it is always best to recognize that we don't need to be superhumans and that it is okay to ask for support and to try your best to do so before you are in the midst of the storm. And for those of us who have walked down this, to do what you're doing, right? To have these conversations and to make this a much more normal part of what we're all sitting around chatting about. Like we all need this.
For sure. For sure. If you don't mind, can I branch off into your spiritual background?
Yeah.
And is there unique things, aspects that you're finding of that in your work on how to incorporate that, or what maybe touch people with those with that same background or those interests, maybe to bring them into the type of work that you're doing?
Yeah. So through the course of my doula work, I also spent about a decade with the Dinner Party, which is a grief nonprofit, and I was a director with them and their director of BIPOC grief education. And I just left the Dinner Party in October and launched A Healing Doula Academy. So it's an online self-paced training program for people who are becoming grief and death doulas who wish to be rooted in ancient spiritual wisdom. My own background is that before I was born, my mother was studying to be a Swami. For those who don't know, that is a spiritual teacher akin to a monk. And it was the death of her own mother that brought her back to New York, and where she met my father, who was studying meditation. And so I was raised between New York and between the spiritual ashram. And so I was raised around healers and teachers. And as I mentioned, when I was in the fog of my own grief journey, when I was first walking through it, I started to pull on a lot of different tools and realize how helpful they could be. And so we know about things like how to address the mental body, right? We do that through talk therapy. We do that by chatting with friends or family. What we don't often do specifically in the Western world is address the emotional body, address the soul when it pertains to healing. And so when we hear these terms, holistic healing, a lot of people hear that and it's like, okay, that's just some new woo-woo term. It's not.
Yeah.
It's the whole of a person. And so it's understanding that we do not, while we are not ever trying to heal anyone in grief or heal anyone who is dying, what we are trying to do is connect, to draw a union between the mind, body, and soul, to create a more harmonious vessel so that you are able to process what you are moving through with clarity and with focus, and while being grounded and from a place of calm. And so it is known that when we look at things like sound healing is a real thing, right? There are scientists that are now accepting this, but ancient civilizations have known this forever. It was in the 1930s when the sound frequency was changed from one frequency to another when it came to mainstream music. The reason it was done that was because they understood that frequency could affect how your cells operated and therefore how your emotions responded. So if we understand that you can change the frequency to what it is now, which makes people more anxious, more fearful, then you can also go the opposite way, which is using frequencies that impact you at a cellular level to bring you into calm and balance and to instrument healing, right? So these are some of the things that we weave into grief and death care. Sacred movement, somatic movement is something that got very popular in the 60s or 70s. Again, this is very ancient, right? There are cultures that understood that when you move certain areas of the body, you unlock energetic blockages. And energetic blockages don't allow you to process whatever it is that you're moving through. And so we weave in things like sacred movements so that you can unblock what is preventing you from being able to manage what you're walking through. Plant medicine, herbalism, right? This is nothing against any of Western pharmaceuticals. Do what you choose to do. However, there are also plants that cultures have known from the beginning of time address emotional body concerns, emotional blockages. You know, we think about traditional Chinese medicine, they tell you that grief lives in the lungs and the small intestines. So part of what our students are learning are how to weave herbal care specifically into treating lungs and small intestine. not everyone can address their grief head on, right? What spiritual work is doing is saying, for those who perhaps do not wish to always be talking about it, that there are other ways for you to be moving it throughout your body, right? Through Reiki, through Tai Chi, through massage, acupressure. That all of these things are also things that should be learned, which breath practices are right for which form of grief you're experiencing, how to deal with people culturally, because that also plays a part into how they process loss, right? I think that how I look at the academy is that we're not training doulas, but this is like an initiation of remembering practices. We all have these in our bloodlines. And it's just coming to a point, I think, particularly as we're watching systems fail around us, that we start focusing on, well, how do I get back to community care? How do I get back to practices that my great-great-grandparents did know about and used? How do I understand that there are other ways that I can support myself and other people that might get deeper and might be more effective than what we're watching happening right now?
I am on board. And this is new for me. Throughout my life, I've taken vitamins at times that I thought were effective and these type of things. But, I think we've been ruled by the media and society and our culture, to tell us what's good for us or what's not good for us. And, what I've discovered since, my son's loss a couple of years ago, I say loss all the time. I believe he's here, but you know, I'm noticing and studying, some of the scientific aspects now where, quantum physics and these type of things are coming to, and it's not brand new that they tell us that everything is frequency and everything is based on that. So it makes a lot of sense for our bodies and everything else to have the right things in harmony for our health, for our mental health and everything else. So, I'm loving the exploration of this and I believe it. And so I'm trying to put into practice a lot of those things to assist myself as well. But, everyone's on their path. You need to explore it yourself. But I'm seeing more and more in my exploration that it's valid, totally valid. And so, and you make very valid points with, the history and the cultures and everything else. It's been told for years and it's just been ignored in a lot of our society, unfortunately. So it's nice to bring it back. And I love hearing your explanation of everything and the depth of it. That's really what I wanted to hear on this. And I'm glad you brought that all out. Yeah. So is there anything else you'd like to elaborate on with that portion of it?
No, I mean, I think, for the Academy, I urge people to have a look at the site, to have a look at that curriculum. It's something I'm so proud of. This is 44 years of a culmination of information and wisdom, teachings, rituals that I've gained from healers that I've had the honor to sit with, from teachings that I've studied, from ways that I've implemented this into my own life and into my client's life. It's 17 years of grief and death doula work. But it honestly just makes me proud. It's I think we are in a really interesting precipice right now in the time that we're living in. And I think we are being gifted the opportunity to say, I'd like to do things different. And sometimes different is going back to what was simpler and older. And I urge folks to really think about that, about how do I want to show up for myself? How do I want to show up for other people? And not everything has to be turned into a career. Sometimes these sorts of programs are meant to just unlock something in you, right? Unlock a new path for you. And so I invite you all. I'm going to give Tom an offer for the listeners to join us. But outside of the curriculum, we have some phenomenal guest teachers. I put up a new workshop every other month so that people are able to meet other grief and death doulas and just see what this work looks like and how it can show up for different folks. For people who have chosen to just be in the grief conversation and death conversation, just to meet all of the beautiful humans that are out here in some way or another on this path. I think most of us have dealt with grief intimately, and I think it's really incredible to watch how many of us have chosen to reach back and to open up conversations and doors for others. And I hope that the Academy is also part of that, of
Well,
reaching back.
thank you.
So
Thank you. I appreciate that.
no.
Your offer and things. And, you may have another student, you don't know,
Yes, please.
but so that is something that you offer out there. And this is what I wanted to get to too. And that's for anybody, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And, I did notice some other things on your site. You're involved with help texts. Are you involved with them?
I am.
What is health text for the people who don't know out there?
So help text, what's interesting is why I like help text, and I was just talking about them yesterday, so that's funny, is that what I learned over my years, especially on this side of the work, is that you have to meet people where they are and understand that not everybody's arriving from the same lens. What I mean by that is help text is for the folks who don't want to have conversations, right? So if you're a griever and you're like, I would love if I just got like a piece of advice, when you're just like really sad, you're like, I just wish somebody would like give me a nice piece of advice. I wish somebody would just give me like something that makes me feel good in my heart, that gives me some sort of direction right now. That's what help text is for. So you're not interested in having a conversation with a person. You're interested in looking up like what you're dealing with, what your loss type is, and what kind of response you'd like back. And then people like me, who are grief experts, have all contributed answers based upon prompts that are tailored to best meet where you are. So it's for the folks who are like, I just need something like fast and something that connects me to something that makes my soul and my heart feel good in the moment. But you are
Right.
getting
Thanks. I'll have
information from real folks, and I am a
Yeah, I'll
contributor
have the
over
link.
there.
We'll have the link, of course, in the show notes and everything for that, and the vast other things that you're involved in. I think that's great too because it's individual. You don't
No,
have to. It's not a canned thing coming to you every
no, it's
day.
not.
Like you can get a good word in an email blast or something every day, but it's not like that. It's something you where you are kind of drives the responses that you get. Is that correct?
It is. And what I really like about it also is it's not some huge engine running. Like, Emma Payne runs it. It's a small organization. And all of those who have contributed have really spent a lot of time thinking about what they would want to receive, specifically because most of us are grievers ourselves. And so it's not just canned responses, and it's things that have really there's like been thought and effort put behind it and care. And so I urge people to look into it, to sign up.
Yeah, I was happy to see you were involved with it because I had made some contact with someone from there, and then they were going to put me in touch with maybe someone who's utilizing it, who's using it, that became part of the organization and things. So, but that's great. Yeah, that's something for people to look into. What else we got here? The Four
Got
Grief
my
Speakers
book,
Bureau,
Grief
the
Gems.
book. Oh, that's right, Grief
So
Gems, the
Grief
book.
Gems, I wrote Grief Gems a few years ago. I left. So interesting backstory. I was living in the United States. I had moved to Miami, Florida in my 30s and was doing much of my doula work there. I, as we were talking about like being untethered and being able to take risks, I then sold everything in 2019 and bought a school bus and converted it into a tiny home with my then husband and toured the US for 2 years. And then moved to Curacao and left the United States. So that was like 5 years ago. And wrote Grief Gems in Curacao. And Grief Gems was the book that I wish I had had when I first lost my parents. I can cry thinking about it. Grief Gems is like everything that I wish someone had said to me. It was every tip that I knew got me through, but that I also have used, and given and seen be effective for other folks. It's my story. It's just a really beautiful book, and I'm really proud of it. And so, Grief Gems is my book. For Grief Speakers Bureau, yeah, is a really great coalition of grief experts that you're able to hire. So we're hired by corporations, funeral homes, organizations, anybody that's interested, and you can go on to that and see the specific types of loss perhaps that we all deal with. but it's just a way, if you are interested in hiring someone, let's say, to come into your company and speak about loss and how to manage it within the workplace. If you are a funeral home who's interested in bringing in a grief expert to speak to families, or to those within, the funeral home business, the range is wide, but it's just a great network of folks. And yeah, I think we're
Never
coming to
enough resources. Never enough.
Never
I
enough. The
found that
dinner
out.
party I mentioned, I just left, but they are a fantastic organization. They connect people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s who have lost people over either in-person or virtual spaces. There's lots of events and workshops for those who ask why in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. Because one, it was originally started in 2000, I believe, 9 by 2 women in their 20s. But it also is because those tend to be very transient years of people who are moving through jobs, perhaps are not situated in a family unit yet or in their forever home yet. And so it was a way to provide community for what really didn't exist. There was a lot of help for seniors. There was a lot of help for older adults. And so if you're 20s, 30s, or like me in your 40s, that's another space that I highly recommend.
Oh, that's great. Sounded great. And was that probably therapeutic for you at the time, right?
It was. I mean, I started as a host. So there are hosts and dinner partiers. And at that point, and still now, hosts open their home. Sometimes you meet in a public space, but I used to open my home every Sunday to folks that lived in Miami, Florida. And it was people who, represented a wide range of loss types. And we would have brunch and sit and talk. And it's not supposed to be a replacement for therapy as much as it is an opportunity for peer-to-peer support. And then I started working for them a few years after, and then spent a decade with them as staff. And it's just a fantastic org. And they also offer something called buddy support, which is, again, meeting people where they are. It's just one-on-one. Instead of you being connected to 12 people, you can just be connected to one through the phone. And so, yeah, it was extremely healing, and being staff there was wonderful.
Let me ask you this. I was thinking about this. The younger generation right now, maybe that age range.
Mm-hmm.
I'm seeing that. I think they're very intuitive. They seem to be more into mindfulness practices, and those type of things. That seems to be rising up in that community. But then they're fighting the stigma of grief that society has laid on them. So trying to, crash through that. So I love that an organization like you're talking about, because I think they want to explore that. They want to be part of something like that, but they don't know that those resources are available to them out there because of the stigma that society suppresses everything with, that we're trying to break through. So,
Yeah, I think every generation below us, like I look at the ones that are under me now that are in their 30s, and I have to say they're braver than the ones that are in my 40s, right? Like I think every generation younger is actually a bit braver than the one who's come before. I think that is cyclical in terms of how like our earth cycles work, right? It's like there are the generations that had to pay the dues, and then there are ones who are able to be brought in a bit more ascended, a bit more knowledgeable from incarnation, and so they're not as programmed, and so they are a bit more open. I do think that what the younger generations fight, and this is because of this access to AI and social media, is to do it's very individualistic, right? It's much more siloed. It's much more in your home, deal with it. And you are bombarded with images of folks who seem to be doing quite well, right? And very, very quickly. And so I think that's something that they'll have to work on. But I think that within every generation, there are those who wake up and who help the others behind them. And so I have faith in all of them. I have faith in where we are right now, that we're watching a lot of these practices have rise because we're watching so much of what we have given credence to fall. And so people are looking to, well, if I know this doesn't work, then what does? And for so many of us, it's realizing that I cannot ignore my mental health, my mindfulness practices, my wellness, looking at myself as a whole person and not just a walking think tank or hustle body. I think we're all having those moments of pause right now and saying, this is no longer working. So what am I going to have to do moving forward? And I think the fact that science is now backing up what so many of our elders have said forever, is wonderful, because I think it will prompt those who have believed that all of this was woo-woo and all of this was what those hippies did, right? To understand, like, no, that was just them telling you that these people didn't know what they were doing. And look, there were crazies in every bunch, but the practices were correct and the practices are effective. And whichever route you want to go, you can find science journals that back up the effectiveness of breath work and meditation, or go the woo-woo route. Do whatever you got to go, but understand the value of why these practices have lasted as long as they have, right? These were
Yeah.
not drawn on hieroglyphics on temple walls for no reason, right? They
Mm-hmm.
understood it then. So let's
Yeah.
just admit
You
we
know,
need to go back.
yeah. And I agree with you too. I think I say that there's an enlightenment going on
Mm-hmm.
in folks like us. I know it's happening in me personally. I can't speak
Mm-hmm.
for everybody, but it seems to me that there's a movement happening in all of
Absolutely.
this. And at the very least, I would tell somebody, if they're freaked out by the woo-woo thing or whatever, the very least, it makes your life so much more interesting. You talked about that a little bit of just, the going with blinders on and just, going through and, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, when you start, really implementing some of these things, just mindfulness alone,
Yeah.
your life is so much more interesting. And you start seeing that those interesting things in other things in life, all of a sudden
Mm-hmm.
it broadens the perspective so much.
I think that, one of the reasons I've been so adamant about weaving it into grief and death care is because the one thing that mindfulness practices, spiritual practices, ceremony, ritual, all of these things do is remind you of your inherent power. It reminds you of how much more control you have over how you respond to things, how you are moving and walking through your life. It reframes your place in your world. And when you can offer that to someone, when someone can embody that groundedness and that balance, you've just equipped somebody with an entirely new approach to life, entirely new approach to how they're going to move forward. This is what I say about the academy. Like, we're not looking to heal anyone. We're looking to remind people of who they are, right? This is what
Yeah.
these practices do, is they remind you of who you are outside of the noise, outside of the programming, outside of whatever it is, because we all come in knowing all of this, right? And it's like, then you get to a certain point in your life where you have to almost deprogram yourself and remember what you came in here as before you were told what to be. And we are in that time. We're in the age of Aquarius. Like, this time has been prophesized as people would start waking up and would
Yeah. I
start
think
looking at
people,
themselves differently.
yeah, folks have been, a lot of the terms empowerment and things like this
Mm-hmm.
have been really distorted. And
Mm-hmm.
it's simple that we do not have to be ruled by our external circumstances.
Yeah.
And you just see so many that, oh, this keeps happening to me, or this, whatever, and all this.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't recognize that they do have a power and ability to change those things. And
Absolutely.
again, this is not getting woo woo or anything. This is talking about, taking back control to that
Mm-hmm.
sense. I mean, little steps, whatever you have to do,
Mm-hmm.
that those things. And I say this a lot, but I'm no longer affected by the external circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
I firmly believe that we exist beyond this plane, and
Absolutely.
so I'm not affected by that anymore. It doesn't matter to me.
Mm-hmm.
World events, everything else, I'm aware of them, and I
Mm-hmm.
do process them. I look at them a lot because it affects how I interact with other people. But that does not rule my life, or the fear, that fear of that does not rule my life ever anymore. And so that is so freeing, and it's empowering. And so those type of terms just need to be put in their proper perspective when you're looking into this.
It's true. It's true. I think fear is an important word to bring up. So much of what we avoid is based on fear, right? So much of what we when we think about doing something new or different or finding a new approach is wrapped up in fear. And I find that these practices help you to eliminate that, and to make you realize, like, oh, there's literally nothing. It's the idea of fear. It's the idea of something I'm inventing in my head that has me freaked out. And I think what's so powerful is that these practices, they give you the opportunity that you just mentioned of being able to step back and realize, like, that is noise out there. And even the noise in here, that's not me either, right? That's just your mind chattering. And when you can gain that kind of perspective, it's true, life becomes much more interesting. It becomes much more fun, much easier than we originally make it, when we associate ourselves with the chatter in here and the chatter out there.
Yeah, it's so freeing. It's so freeing. Yeah. Incredible. Anything else that maybe we didn't cover? Do you work with people one-on-one still?
I do. So I have the academy, but I also work with people one-on-one. So I'm currently in Germany. I have lots of American clients. We work virtually. Folks who are either in Germany, some folks fly here and work with me. But otherwise, you can work with me one-on-one for grief mentorship and support. You can go to my website, ahealingdoula.com, so you can see all of my services. But I offer private yoga, guided meditation, deep relaxation, one-on-one support for grief, death doula work, and that's all virtual or in person.
Fantastic. Whereabouts in Germany are you?
I'm right outside of Heidelberg.
Okay. I was there in high school, believe it or not. Yeah, it was great.
I love it.
Back then, and I tell people this is funny all the time because they would be arrested at this point, but our chaperones used to take us to the pubs when in high school.
The drinking age here is really young. Like, I think it's like 17, and even then they don't ask, although you shouldn't have been taken on school trip.
Yeah. No, it was great. It was fun. I love Germany. We went to Paris for 3 days and then Germany for 5 or so. We went up the Rhine River. So we were in Köln. We were in Cologne.
Yep.
Rudesheim, just outside of Frankfurt. Koblenz, I think, was another place that we were in. Koblenz.
I don't know there.
Yeah.
I was right outside of Frankfurt for my first year and a half and loved it. But Frankfurt has a different vibe than Heidelberg. Frankfurt felt much more like kind of, it's a business district, so it has that energy. Heidelberg is much more like castle and the older architecture, though Frankfurt has it as well, but the older architecture, and it's just beautiful and peaceful, and Germany has been a wonderful surprise. I did not expect to love it as much as I have.
I tell a funny story. I took 1 year of German in high school. So I took that in freshman year, and then I went in junior year on this trip. And so I only remembered a little bit, but I remembered how to order a beer. So we went to a pub. So I wanted to use my German, So I said, "Eine Bier bitte." And the waitress says to me in the most beautiful English you could ever imagine, "Oh, you'd like a beer?" Because they learn English as their major language, actually.
First of all, they learn English, like they all speak English. But I have also tried to practice my German, and they answer me back in English, and I'm like, no, like, I'm really trying. They're like, we're not.
I was like, yeah, thanks a lot.
They're like,
I was there with
another one.
Yeah, we considered it West Germany because the wall was still up when I was there. That's how long ago it was.
True. So I have to say, it's just a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful place. Really, I
loved it. Yeah. Loved it. It is beautiful. Yeah.
But I do offer everything virtual, and make myself available for American hours. So,
Excellent. Thank you, Sundari. Thank you very much for everything. Pleasant conversation. Let's stay connected. And I'm going to check out some of the things you talked about. And you let me know, you mentioned, something for
yes,
the podcast or something
let
like
me
that.
have your email address. Can you give me
Yep,
that?
it's tom@heroesingrief.com. So, and we'll have all your information in the show notes and everything, all the links and everything. So just provide me with whatever you'd like on there, and we'll make sure that that's on there and get everything out about the book and everything else. Okay?
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Tom. This is a great conversation.
All right. You too. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Heroes in Grief podcast. If you'd like access to any of the links that we discussed in today's show, you can find them in the show notes. There's also a link there to support the podcast if you care to. And there is an email link for me there. I'd love to hear from you and your ideas about the show or what you thought about the show. You really can help out this podcast to get to more people if you subscribe, rate, or review it in whichever way your platform provides. Each week, Heroes in Grief is released on Sunday, so look for new episodes there. Thank you again for listening to Heroes in Grief.